My name is Mattie Wilson. I am 64 years old, and I built a multi-million-dollar business from my garage while raising my son Jackson as a single mother. After decades of sacrifice, I thought nothing could break my heart more than losing my husband. I was wrong. Last spring, Jackson not only uninvited me from his wedding, but then sent me a bill for $290,000 with a note saying, "Be thankful I let you contribute." The pain of rejection mixed with such entitled audacity nearly broke me. But what I did next changed everything. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against someone you love. Trust me, what happened next taught me the most valuable lesson about boundaries I've ever learned. The morning my husband Thomas died from a sudden aneurysm, I became a 29-year-old widow with a 4-year-old son and barely enough savings to cover the funeral. Thomas and I had been high school sweethearts from a small town in Ohio. We'd married young and moved to Connecticut for his job in insurance. We were just starting to find our footing financially when he collapsed in our kitchen one Sunday morning while making pancakes for Jackson. The first year after Thomas died remains a blur in my memory. I remember crying in the shower so Jackson wouldn't hear me working as a receptionist during the day, then as a waitress at night, while a neighbor watched my boy. I remember the crushing weight of responsibility, knowing I was all Jackson had left in the world. "Mama, when is Daddy coming back?" Jackson would ask, his big brown eyes so much like his father's, staring up at me with confusion. Each time I'd have to swallow the lump in my throat and explain again that Daddy wasn't coming back, but that I would always be there for him. By the time Jackson started kindergarten, I had enrolled in night classes at the community college. I was determined to finish the business degree I'd put on hold when I got pregnant. My parents helped when they could, sending small checks from their retirement fund that I tried to refuse, but ultimately accepted for Jackson's sake. Those years were brutally hard, but also filled with a special kind of intimacy between Jackson and me. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Our Friday night ritual was making homemade pizza and building blanket forts in the living room where we'd read stories until he fell asleep. For his birthdays, I couldn't afford lavish parties, but I'd take the day off work and let him plan our adventure day anywhere within driving distance that was free or nearly so. "We're rich in what matters," I would tell him when he noticed his friends had newer toys or bigger houses. And for many years he seemed to believe me. After finishing my business degree, I took a risk and started a home organization business from our garage. I'd always had a knack for creating systems and making spaces functional. At first it was just me, a few basic tools, and a second-hand van I'd purchased with my tax refund. I called it Simply Organized and designed my own logo using a library computer. My first clients were neighbors and friends from Jackson's school. I charged very little, sometimes accepting baked goods or babysitting as payment, but word spread about my ability to transform chaotic spaces into peaceful ones. Within 2 years, I had hired my first employee. By the time Jackson was in middle school, I had a small office and a team of 5. The business continued to grow steadily. I reinvested almost every penny of profit, living modestly in the same small ranch house we'd moved to after selling the home Thomas and I had shared. Jackson sometimes complained about our cramped house as he hit his teenage years, but I was saving for something more important, his education. Mom Trevor's parents got him a car for his 16th birthday, he mentioned casually one evening. "That's nice for Trevor," I replied, stirring spaghetti sauce at the stove. "But we have different priorities. Remember college fund first." Jackson sighed but nodded. He was a smart boy who understood sacrifice, having watched me make so many. And when he received his acceptance letter to Princeton with a partial scholarship, the look of pride on his face made every late night and missed vacation worth it. I still remember driving him to campus, our old Honda packed to the roof with his belongings. I'd finally expanded my business to 3 locations across the state, and while we weren't wealthy by any means, I could afford to fill the gaps his scholarship didn't cover without loans. "You did it, Mom," Jackson said, as we unloaded his things into his dormitory. "You made all this possible." I hugged him tight, tears streaming down my face. "No, we did it together. And this is just the beginning for you." I had no idea then how prophetic those words would be, or how painfully our paths would diverge once he stepped into the world I'd sacrificed everything to give him access to. The changes in Jackson didn't happen overnight. They were subtle at first, so gradual I almost didn't notice until the transformation was complete. My sweet, thoughtful boy, who once made me handmade Mother's Day cards, morphed into someone I barely recognized during his college years. It started with small things during his freshman year. His calls home became less frequent. When he did call, he'd drop casual references to classmates with famous last names or weekend trips to vacation homes I couldn't have afforded in a lifetime. I was proud he was making friends and experiencing a world beyond what I could have shown him, so I encouraged these new relationships. By sophomore year, he'd joined an elite eating club, the Princeton equivalent of a fraternity with an even more selective membership process. His winter break that year was the first time I sensed real distance between us. "Mom, do you have to wear that sweatshirt to the mall?" he asked, eyeing my comfortable Simply Organized company sweatshirt with barely concealed disdain. I looked down at myself confused. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing, it's just kind of promotional, isn't it? Like you're trying to advertise." I changed the sweatshirt to make him comfortable, but the comments stung. It was the first of many small criticisms about my appearance, my home, even the way I spoke. After graduation, Jackson accepted a position at a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan. His starting salary was nearly double what I had made after 10 years running my business. I was immensely proud, but also increasingly aware of a growing gulf between us. He purchased designer suits and rented an apartment in a doorman building he couldn't really afford. When I expressed concern about his spending, he dismissed me with practiced condescension. "It's about presenting the right image, Mom. In my world, appearances matter." His world, as if the world I had built for us was now something separate and lesser. The real turning point came at a dinner celebrating his first year at the firm. I had driven into the city and booked a hotel room, excited to see where my son worked. Jackson gave me a quick tour of the office, introducing me to colleagues with obvious reluctance. At dinner, he corrected my pronunciation of menu items and sighed when I asked the waiter questions about the wine list. Later, I overheard him speaking to a colleague who had stopped by our table. "Yes, that's my mother," he said with a tight smile. "She's visiting from Connecticut. She runs a small business, nothing major." Nothing major. The business that had put him through Princeton, that now employed 30 people across 5 locations, that had recently been featured in a regional business magazine. Nothing major. That night in my hotel room, I cried for the first time in years, mourning the son I seemed to be losing to a world that valued appearances over substance. 6 months later, Jackson called to tell me he had met someone. Her name was Tiffany Bradford, an art gallery director from a good family with connections throughout New York society. They had met at a charity gala, and he was clearly smitten. "You'll love her, Mom," he assured me. "She's incredible." I met Tiffany 2 months later at a brunch Jackson arranged at an upscale restaurant in the city. She was tall, immaculately groomed, and coldly beautiful, with the kind of posture taught at expensive finishing schools. She air-kissed my cheeks and immediately launched into a monologue about the gallery she curated and her recent trip to Art Basel. "And what is it that you do again, Mrs. Wilson?" she asked, eventually her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Please call me Mattie," I offered warmly. "I own a home organization company." "Oh," her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Like a cleaning service." "Not exactly," Jackson interjected quickly. "Mom helps wealthy clients optimize their spaces. She has quite a few high-profile customers now." I noticed how he reframed my work to make it sound more impressive to Tiffany, and something inside me deflated. My son was embarrassed by what I did, by who I was. As their relationship progressed, I watched Jackson's social media transform. Suddenly, his Instagram was filled with carefully staged photos at exclusive restaurants, weekend getaways to the Hamptons, and charity events where he and Tiffany posed with minor celebrities. Every caption seemed designed to showcase their perfect life and relationship. "Isn't it a bit much?" I asked during a rare phone call after seeing a post where he tagged over 20 luxury brands in a single photo of their dinner table. "It's networking, Mom," he replied with that same condescending tone. "Tiffany understands how to build the right kind of social presence. It's opened doors for both of us." When they announced their engagement after just 10 months of dating, I tried to be happy for them. I drove to New York with a bottle of champagne and a heartfelt card. Tiffany received my congratulations with practiced graciousness while subtly examining the label on the champagne I'd brought. It wasn't prestigious enough, I could tell. "We're thinking a summer wedding," she said already, scrolling through venue options on her phone. "Small and intimate. Just 400 of our closest friends and family. 400 people. Small and intimate." I smiled and nodded, already wondering what my role would be in this production and whether there was still room in Jackson's life for his embarrassingly ordinary mother. The wedding planning process began with an elaborate engagement party at the Bradford family's Connecticut estate. I arrived early, hoping to help with preparations, but was politely directed to sit with distant relatives, while professional events staff handled everything. Tiffany's mother, Patricia, was a more polished, more intimidating version of her daughter. She swept into the party in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. When Jackson introduced us, she gave me a quick up-and-down assessment. "Matty, what a pleasure. And Jackson has told us so little about you," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be so proud of how far he's come." The phrasing wasn't lost on me. How far he'd come. As if he'd escaped some terrible circumstance, rather than being raised with love by a hardworking mother. During that first gathering, I tried to contribute to wedding conversations, but my suggestions were consistently met with polite dismissal. A local florist did my neighbor's daughter's wedding, and the arrangements were beautiful. I offered when flower discussions began. Patricia exchanged a quick glance with Tiffany. "We're actually considering flying in a floral designer from Paris who did Tiffany's cousin's wedding at Lake Como last year. But thank you for the suggestion." As the weeks passed, I was included in planning meetings, but quickly realized my role was to agree with decisions already made. The venue would be an exclusive estate in the Hamptons. The catering would be handled by a celebrity chef. The flowers decor dress, and even the invitations would all be the most expensive options available. When I gently asked Jackson about costs, during a rare moment alone, he became defensive. "Tiffany deserves the best mom. Her family has certain expectations. I understand that, honey, but is this what you want? This level of expense seems excessive." His expression hardened. "This is exactly what I want. Just because we grew up making do with less doesn't mean I have to settle now." Making do with less. As if the childhood I'd given him had been some kind of deprivation rather than the best I could provide as a single mother. The most painful moment came during a brunch at the Bradford home where wedding tasks were being delegated. I sat quietly, hoping there might be something meaningful I could contribute to. "And what about Matty?" someone finally asked. "What will she be handling?" Patricia smiled tightly. "We thought perhaps Matty could help coordinate the welcome bags for out-of-town guests." Welcome bags, the most minor task they could think of. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "I'd be happy to." Later in the bathroom, I overheard Patricia speaking to another woman. "It's awkward, of course. She's just so basic. Not at all what we're used to in our circle. But she did raise Jackson on her own from such humble beginnings. I suppose we should applaud her for that much." I stood frozen in the bathroom stall, tears stinging my eyes. Humble beginnings, basic. As if my entire life's work amounted to nothing in their eyes. That evening I tried to talk to Jackson about how I was feeling, but he immediately became defensive. "They're including you, Mom. What more do you want? You just don't understand our social position now." "Social position," I repeated, stunned. "Jackson, I'm your mother, the only family you have left. And I'm grateful for everything you did," he said, his tone suggesting anything but gratitude. "But this wedding isn't about you. It's about Tiffany and me starting our life together at the level we plan to maintain." I drove home that night with a heaviness in my heart I hadn't felt since Thomas died. My son was slipping away from me, replaced by someone who viewed his upbringing as something to overcome rather than the foundation of who he was. A week later, I received the formal wedding invitation in the mail. It was an elaborate thing, thick, creamy paper in a box with fresh flowers. Tucked inside was a handwritten note that didn't match Jackson's handwriting. While we are thrilled to include you in our special day, we've planned everything meticulously and require minimal involvement from additional parties. Your understanding is appreciated. Minimal involvement. I was being told politely but firmly to stay in my place. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at that beautiful invitation, wondering if there was even a place for me in my son's new life. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening 6 weeks before the wedding. I was reviewing quarterly reports for my business when Jackson's name flashed on my phone screen. I answered eagerly, hoping for a genuine connection after weeks of strained interactions. "Hi, sweetie. How are the wedding plans coming along?" There was a pause, then Jackson cleared his throat. "That's actually why I'm calling Mom. There's been a change of plans regarding the ceremony." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. "What kind of change?" Another pause. "After a lot of discussion with Tiffany and her family, we've decided it would be best if you didn't attend the actual ceremony and reception." The words hit me like a physical blow. I struggled to find my voice. "You're uninviting me from your wedding. I'm your mother, Jackson." "It's not like that," he said quickly, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to dread. "It's just that Tiffany's family has a vision for the day, and frankly they're concerned that your presence might clash with the aesthetic they're creating." Clash with the aesthetic. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "What does that mean?" "You know what I mean, Mom," he said, sounding annoyed now. "You're not comfortable in these high society situations. You say the wrong things, wear the wrong clothes. The Bradfords have a certain image to maintain, and this wedding will have very important people attending." Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the phone. "And I'm not important, I'm your mother, Jackson, the only parent you have left." "Of course you're important," he said quickly, "just in a different way. Look, this is actually for the best. You'd be uncomfortable the whole time anyway, and you can still contribute to the wedding in other ways." "Other ways?" My voice cracked. "Financially," he clarified, "the budget has expanded somewhat, and since you won't have to worry about attending, it would be great if you could help cover some of the costs. Tiffany's parents are already doing so much." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son was banning me from his wedding, but still expected me to pay for it. I ended the call shortly after promising to think about everything, because I was too shocked and heartbroken to argue. For the next week, I called Jackson, repeatedly leaving voicemails, asking to discuss this decision face to face. He didn't answer or return my calls. I sent emails that went unanswered. It was as if he'd made his decision and saw no reason to justify it further. My closest friend Diana came over the weekend after the call, finding me still in pajamas, surrounded by old photo albums. "I don't understand," I told her, showing pictures of Jackson's childhood. "Where did I go wrong? I gave him everything I possibly could." "You didn't go wrong," Diana said firmly, taking the album from my hands. "You were an amazing mother. This isn't about you failing Matty. This is about Jackson changing, and not for the better." "But why? How did my sweet boy become someone who would ban his own mother from his wedding?" Diana sighed. "Money and status change people. Jackson has been seduced by a world that values appearances over substance, and he's chosen that world over the values you taught him." I spent sleepless nights going over every parenting decision, wondering if I should have been stricter or more lenient, if I should have remarried to give him a father figure, if I should have pushed him toward different friends or schools. The questions tortured me as I moved between grief shock and anger. Then, exactly 2 weeks after the uninvite call, a new email arrived from Jackson. The subject line read, "Wedding Financial Contribution Request." My hands trembled as I opened it, not prepared for what I would find inside. There, in a professionally formatted document, was a detailed invoice for $290,000. I stared at my computer screen in stunned disbelief. The itemized bill before me seemed like something from another reality. Hampton Estate Venue. Rental, $120,000. Celebrity chef, catering, $40,000. Floral arrangements, $35,000. Designer wedding dress, $25,000. 3-week honeymoon in Bali and the Maldives, $70,000. At the bottom was a note in Jackson's unmistakable professional email tone. As discussed, please arrange for the transfer of funds to the account below within 30 days. Be thankful I let you contribute to our special day, even if your physical presence isn't required. This allows you to be part of the celebration in a meaningful way. I read the email 3 times each time, feeling a new wave of emotions crash over me. Shock gave way to hurt. Hurt transformed into indignation, and finally a cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't my son anymore. The boy I raised would never have treated anyone this way, let alone his mother. I picked up the phone with shaking hands and called Richard, my financial advisor of 15 years. "Richard, I need to discuss something difficult," I began, and then explained the situation. There was a long silence when I finished. "Matty, I've known you and Jackson for years. This doesn't sound like him at all." "It's who he's become," I said simply. "You know," Richard said carefully, "you are in a financial position where you could pay this if you wanted to. Your business has done exceptionally well these past few years, but that's not the question, is it?" "No," I agreed. "It's not about whether I can, it's about whether I should." Next, I called Sandra, my attorney who had helped me build my business from the ground up. "This is beyond entitled," she said after I forwarded her the email. "Matty, you are under no legal obligation to pay for an adult child's wedding under any circumstances, let alone one you've been explicitly told not to attend." "I know that," I said quietly, "but this isn't really about legal obligations, is it? It's about what happens to my relationship with my only child if I refuse." "The relationship already appears to be severely damaged," Sandra pointed out gently, "and not by your actions. Paying this bill won't fix what's broken here." That night I sat alone on my back porch, looking at the stars Thomas and I used to gaze at together, wondering what he would advise me to do. I thought about the values we had agreed to instill in our son: honesty, respect, gratitude, and understanding that true worth comes from character, not possessions. I thought about the business I had built from nothing while raising Jackson alone, the example I had tried to set about working hard and treating people with dignity. Had none of that made an impression? Had it all been washed away by the allure of status and wealth? As the night grew deeper, I realized that giving in to this demand wouldn't help Jackson. It would only reinforce the entitled behavior that was destroying the person I knew he could be. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it breaks your heart to do so. With newfound resolve, I went inside and drafted an email response. Then I deleted it. No, this situation deserved a more personal touch. Jackson needed to hear my voice and see my face when I gave him my answer. I needed to do this with dignity and strength, the same qualities I had tried to model for him throughout his life. I went to bed that night with a plan forming in my mind, a response that Jackson and Tiffany wouldn't expect. For the first time since the uninvited call, I slept soundly, certain of my path forward. I spent the next morning carefully preparing myself both emotionally and practically. I dressed in one of my best business suits, the same one I'd worn when signing the lease on my 5th store location. I wanted to project confidence and self-respect for what I was about to do. First, I called my assistant to clear my schedule for the day. Then I wrote a check for $5,000, a generous but reasonable wedding gift. I placed it in a beautiful card where I wrote a simple message: "Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness. Love, always, Mom." I drove the 90 minutes to Jackson's Manhattan apartment building, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. I hadn't warned him I was coming, knowing he would likely make an excuse not to see me. The doorman recognized me from previous visits and let me up without calling ahead. When Jackson opened the door, his expression shifted from surprise to wariness. "Mom, what are you doing here? "We need to talk in person," I said calmly. "May I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was immaculate, as always, decorated in the minimal expensive style Tiffany preferred. To my surprise, Tiffany herself emerged from the bedroom, clearly having heard my voice. "Mrs. Wilson," she said coolly, "this is unexpected." "I apologize for not calling ahead," I replied with practiced politeness. "But after receiving your invoice, I felt this conversation needed to happen face to face." Jackson's posture stiffened. "If you're here about the wedding contribution, we can discuss payment options if the full amount is difficult for you right now." The condescension in his tone nearly broke my composure, but I held firm. "Actually, I've made my decision about the contribution. May we sit down?" We moved to their living room, where I sat across from them, my back straight, hands folded calmly in my lap. They exchanged a glance, clearly expecting me to capitulate. "I've given a lot of thought to your request," I began evenly, "and I've come to a decision I hope you'll both try to understand." I removed the card from my purse and placed it on the coffee table between us. "Inside is a check for $5,000. It's my gift to you both for your wedding. It's generous, thoughtful, and within normal bounds of what a parent might give their child for such an occasion. It is also the only financial contribution I will be making." Jackson's face flushed red. $5,000. The venue deposit alone was $40,000. "I understand that," I replied calmly. "But you chose that venue knowing its cost without consulting me. I was not involved in any budget discussions or decisions about this wedding. In fact, I've been explicitly told my input is not wanted and my presence is not welcome." "This isn't fair," Tiffany interjected, her voice tight. "My parents are already contributing so much. We were counting on your help." I turned to her with the same calm demeanor. "Tiffany, my son, has made it clear that I don't fit into the image you're trying to create for your wedding day. That's your choice to make. But you cannot exclude me from your celebration and still expect me to fund it." "So this is punishment," Jackson said bitterly, "because we hurt your feelings." "No," I said, my voice softening slightly. "This isn't punishment. This is a boundary. Throughout this entire wedding planning process, my feelings, my input, and ultimately my presence have been deemed unimportant, yet my money is still welcome. That's not how respectful relationships work. You don't understand the pressure we're under," Jackson argued, his tone becoming desperate. "Tiffany's family, their connections, the people attending the expectations, it all has to be perfect. I understand pressure," I replied, my voice steady. "I understand working hard for what you have. What I don't understand is how my son, who I raised to value people over possessions, could tell his mother she isn't welcome at his wedding, but then send her a bill for nearly $300,000. Tiffany stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. My father was right about you. You've never understood our world." "Perhaps not," I acknowledged, remaining seated. "But I understand respect, gratitude, and what it means to treat people with dignity, regardless of what they can give you. Those are values that transcend any social circle." "What are we supposed to do now?" Jackson demanded, panic edging into his voice. "The wedding is 5 weeks away. Everything's booked. People have made travel arrangements." I stood then, picking up my purse. "You have options. You can scale back to a wedding you can afford. You can ask Tiffany's parents to cover the difference. You can postpone until you've saved enough. But what you cannot do is make your choices someone else's financial responsibility." The look of shock on both their faces might have been comical in another context. They had been so certain I would give in, so confident in their power to manipulate me with the threat of losing my relationship with Jackson. "And if we don't invite you after this," Jackson said, his final attempt at leverage. The question hurt, but I was prepared for it. That would break my heart, but I'll still sleep at night knowing I stood up for my dignity. Can you say the same about how you've treated me? I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "The invitation to be your mother remains open, Jackson, whenever you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect. I love you. I always will. But I love myself too." As I walked out of that building and into the bright spring sunlight, tears streamed down my face. But for the first time in months, they weren't tears of hurt and confusion. They were tears of relief. I had reclaimed my self-worth and set a boundary that should have been established long ago. Whatever happened next, I would face it with my head held high. The weeks following my confrontation with Jackson and Tiffany were painfully quiet. No calls, no texts, no emails. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard their wedding plans were proceeding, though, at a scaled-back venue. Apparently, Tiffany's parents had agreed to cover most of the expenses, rather than see their daughter's perfect day diminished in any way. I didn't receive a new invitation, not that I expected one. On the actual wedding day, I kept myself busy with work, trying not to imagine the ceremony happening without me. That evening, I allowed myself one glass of wine and a good cry before resolving to move forward. The silence continued for weeks after the wedding. Through social media, which I eventually stopped checking, I saw carefully curated photos of their dream day, an abbreviated honeymoon in Bali, apparently shortened from the originally planned 3 weeks to 10 days. The pain of being excluded from such an important moment in my only child's life was unlike anything I'd experienced before. There were days when I questioned my decision, wondering if I should have just paid the money to maintain the relationship, however flawed. But deeper reflection always brought me back to the same conclusion: boundaries were necessary for healthy relationships, and I had done the right thing by establishing mine. I sought help through therapy, something I'd never considered before. Dr. Larson, a compassionate woman in her 60s, helped me process my grief and guilt. "You're mourning the son you raised and the relationship you thought you had," she explained during one session. "But you're also mourning the future you envisioned being a part of his adult life, possibly grandchildren someday. It's a complex loss." "I keep wondering where I went wrong," I admitted. "From what you've described, you modeled excellent values. But children ultimately make their own choices as adults. Jackson has chosen a value system different from the one you taught him. That's not your failure, it's his choice." Those sessions helped me begin to heal and redirect my energy. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while focusing so much on Jackson. I joined a book club and a hiking group, building a community that valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. My business continued to thrive, and I decided to take a sabbatical to travel. I'd always wanted to see Europe, but had postponed those dreams to raise Jackson and build my company. Now, at 64, I finally took 3 weeks to visit Italy, France, and Spain, soaking in art culture and perspective. In Barcelona, I met another American woman traveling alone, Patricia, who was also estranged from her adult son. "He married a woman who decided I wasn't good enough," she shared over dinner. 28 years of single motherhood, and suddenly I was an embarrassment. Our conversation led to others, and soon I found myself connecting with a network of parents in similar situations. Back home, I joined a support group specifically for parents estranged from adult children. The stories I heard there were heartbreakingly similar to mine: children who had moved into different social circles and decided their parents no longer fit their image. "The hardest part is the holidays," one father shared. "My daughter's been gone 3 years now. I still set a place for her at Thanksgiving." These connections helped me realize I wasn't alone and that knowledge was profoundly healing. 6 months after the wedding, I established a foundation to support single parents starting small businesses, channeling my pain into purpose. The Simply Forward Foundation offered grants, mentorship, and emotional support to parents working to build financial independence while raising children alone. It was through this work that I finally began to find peace. Helping others who were where I had been 30 years ago gave meaning to my experience and created a legacy beyond what I could have imagined. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, 8 months after the wedding, an email from Jackson appeared in my inbox. My heart raced as I opened it. "Mom, I hope this finds you well. Tiffany and I have been doing a lot of thinking these past months. While we still feel our wedding decisions were appropriate for the occasion, I recognize I could have communicated better. If you're open to it, perhaps we could meet for coffee soon and begin rebuilding our relationship. Also, Tiffany and I have found a beautiful brownstone we're interested in purchasing, but we're a bit short on the down payment. Given your business success, We wondered if you might consider helping us with this investment in our future. Looking forward to hearing from you. Jackson. I read the email several times, emotions swirling. There was the barest hint of an apology, buried within a justification, immediately followed by another financial request. Some things, it seemed, hadn't changed at all. After careful consideration, I crafted a response. Dear Jackson, thank you for reaching out. I'm glad to hear you and Tiffany are doing well. I would indeed welcome the opportunity to meet and talk. As for the brownstone, while I'm happy you're finding a home you love, I won't be contributing financially to the purchase. I believe in your ability to work toward your goals independently, just as I did. My door and heart remain open for a relationship based on mutual respect and love, not financial transactions. Let me know when you'd like to meet. Love, Mum. His reply came 2 days later, a terse message saying he was too busy with work to meet after all, but perhaps sometime in the future. It hurt, but not as deeply as before. I was learning that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing the same patterns to continue. I could forgive Jackson for his hurtful actions for my own peace without opening myself up to further manipulation. Through my foundation work, I met Janet, another business owner, whose daughter had followed a similar path to Jackson's. Over lunch one day, she shared wisdom that resonated deeply with me. I finally realized that my daughter's behavior wasn't about me at all, she said. It was about her own insecurities and the values of the world she chose. Once I understood that, I could stop blaming myself and start healing. Do you think they ever come back? I asked. Our children, I mean. Sometimes, she nodded. When they mature enough to recognize authentic relationships matter more than status, but we can't put our lives on hold waiting for that day. She was right. I couldn't pause my healing or growth waiting for Jackson to change. The door would remain open, but I would continue moving forward regardless. A year after the wedding, I expanded the Simply Forward Foundation to include a mentorship program matching established business owners with single-parent entrepreneurs. I sold my main business to my employees through an ownership plan, ensuring they would benefit from the company we had built together. I learned that unconditional love doesn't mean unlimited tolerance. It means caring enough about someone to hold them to a standard of decent behavior. It means valuing yourself enough to establish boundaries when those standards aren't met. The most valuable lesson came from understanding the difference between generosity and enabling. True generosity comes from the heart and expects nothing in return. Enabling perpetuates harmful patterns by removing natural consequences. By refusing to fund a wedding I wasn't welcome to attend, I wasn't being ungenerous. I was refusing to enable behavior that diminished both my son's character and my own dignity. I still hope for reconciliation with Jackson someday. I keep a space in my heart that belongs only to him, the little boy who made blanket forts with me, and the young man who once thanked me for making his education possible. But I no longer define my worth by his acceptance, nor measure my success by his approval. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do when someone treats us as optional is to gracefully excuse ourselves from the game, not with bitterness or revenge, but with the quiet dignity of someone who knows their own value. What's your experience with setting boundaries with loved ones? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping peace and maintaining your self-respect? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that. Standing up for yourself is an act of self-love, not selfishness. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember you are worthy of relationships that honor your dignity.